Welcome to my hopefully not too difficult to follow explanation of how edge patches work in Generation 6 Poké Radar. So there are a lot of radar guides on the internet currently which simply assert to always avoid edge patches without any further explanation. However, this is extremely bad advice, as strictly avoiding edges will make chaining in certain routes much more difficult than it needs to be. And it's so common to see players who are okay with taking some less than ideal patches to build their chain, but will strictly avoid edges, even though a lot of those edge patch options they are trying so hard to avoid are in reality safer than some of the patches they are okay with stepping into. All of this is due to a lack of understanding. Hopefully after watching this video you should see edge patches as not something to be feared, but rather as simply another option of consideration that you have to work with when building your radar chains. So you will notice that the title of this video is Edge Patches and Patch Spawn Mechanics. The reason for this is before we can understand how edge patches work, we first must understand how patches spawn every time the radar is activated. So I'm going to start at the Bulbapedia page for Poké Radar, which unfortunately says very little useful about Generation 6 radar, but what it has to say regarding Generation 4 radar is pretty accurate in my opinion, and it's a place to start at least. So looking at this paragraph in particular, it says, when the Poké Radar is used, the game generates 4 rings around the player, with the first ring consisting of the 8 squares surrounding the player, the second ring consisting of the 16 squares surrounding the first ring, and so on for the third and fourth rings. One random square in each ring will be selected, and if that square is a patch of grass, that patch will shake. Therefore, the maximum number of patches that can shake with each use of the Poké Radar is 4. If fewer than 4 patches shake, then one or more of the randomly selected squares were not patches of grass. If all 4 squares did not contain grass, then the game will display the message, the grassy patch remains silent, and the chain will automatically break. Okay, so let's break that down into diagrams. It references the 4 rings or zones around the player, and every time the radar is activated, one shaking patch will spawn in each zone for a total of 4 patches in each set. So one patch spawns in the 1 zone, one in the 2 zone, one in the 3 zone, and one in the 4 zone. Here is a quick demonstration of this in Pokemon Platinum. If the radar is activated closer to the edges, you will often see less than 4 patches shake, and this is because some of the patches have generated outside of the field of grass. If all 4 generate outside of the field of grass, no grass will shake and your chain will automatically break, which is what is commonly referred to as an edge patch chain break. It's only possible for 0 patches to shake if the radar is activated on an edge patch, as there must be at least 1 grassless tile in each zone for it to be possible. So in this case, since we aren't on an edge, the 1 zone falls entirely on grass, so one of these 8 grass tiles will always shake no matter what, meaning it is not possible for our chain to break in this way. So everything I have said also applies to Generation 6 radar, however there is one difference, and that is instead of 4 patches shaking in each set, there are 5. And the first 4 patches generate in the same way. 1 patch still spawns in each zone, but the question is, where does the 5th patch spawn? And I do know the answer to this. The 5th patch can spawn anywhere except the 4 zone. So here's a summary of how patches spawn. In Generation 4 radar, 4 patches spawn in total, 1 patch in each zone. For Generation 6 radar, 5 patches spawn in total, 1 in each zone, plus the 5th patch spawns somewhere in either the 1 zone, the 2 zone, or the 3 zone. Here's a quick demonstration of this in Pokemon Y. In that very last example, you would have only seen 4 patches shake, even though there were no grassless tiles in the spawnable area. In these cases, what I think is happening is that the 5th patch is trying to generate on the same tile as one of the other patches, If you reset at Route 5 like that, you will only see 4 patches shake once in every 12 or so resets, so this seems to make sense statistically. So just to break this down into diagrams again, in Generation 6, 5 patches spawn in each set. 1 patch still spawns in each zone, so it's still only possible for 0 patches to spawn if the radar was activated on an edge. The existence of the 5th patch does make edge patches a bit safe from Generation 6, as now 5 patches need to generate outside of the field of grass in order for your chain to break. So the 5th patch does give you a bit of extra leeway. So taking all of that information into consideration, we can now start to figure out what the exact odds of an edge patch chain break is. What you will find is that the odds will be different for every edge, and it will depend on the amount of grass in the spawnable area around the edge in question. I'm going to use 3 different edge patches here at Route 21 as examples. Example 1 has 17 grass tiles in the spawnable area. Example 2, which has 43 grass tiles in the spawnable area. And example 3, which has literally every single purple flower tile in this field of grass in the spawnable area, but is still technically an edge because there is still at least 1 grassless tile in each zone. So what I'm going to do now is reset at each of these tiles 30 times each, and keep track of how many grass tiles shake each reset. Okay, so we didn't get many patches shaking when resetting at that tile, mostly either 1 or 0, sometimes 2. Remember, every time 0 patches shake, that is chain broken, so we saw a lot of chain breaks here. Alright, next tile. So resetting here was kind of a mixed bag. We saw 5 patches shake once, and the rest of the time either 4, 3, 2, or 1 patches shook. Not a single time did no grass shake, so no broken chains. Only 1 patch shook on 6 occasions, but remember, 1 patch is all you need to keep your chain going. As long as you get at least 1 to shake, you're good. Alright, last example. As you can see, lots of grass in the spawnable area means lots of grass shaking. We saw 4 or 5 patches shaking almost every reset. You can imagine it's going to be pretty unlikely for 0 patches to shake when resetting at this tile. Okay, so obviously only doing 30 resets isn't that substantial of a sample size, and you could imagine continuing like this, doing thousands of resets and averaging the results to experimentally figure out the approximate odds of an edge patch chain break on a particular tile. However, we don't need to do that, and instead what we can do is use maths. So I would now like to introduce my patch spawn probability calculator. So if you open up the route analysis document, the link to this will be in the description of this video, and scroll all the way down to where it says external links. And the one we're interested in is where it says Poké Patch Spawn Probability Calculator. If you click this link, it will download a Microsoft Excel file onto your computer, and if you open that up, it will look like this. So it defaults to Gen 6 mode, but Gen 4 mode is here as well. The only real difference is the absence of the 5th patch. For the purposes of this video, we're going to focus on these calculations: the odds of spawning 5 patches and the odds of spawning 0 patches. What I am doing with this calculation is treating each of the 5 patches separately and calculating the odds each one has of spawning on a grass tile. And the product of those 5 probabilities will give us the probability that all 5 will spawn on grass. And this is essentially the same calculation except in reverse. So instead of calculating the probability the patches will all spawn on grass, it's the probability of them spawning on not grass. As I've explained, how patches spawn is based on zones. Therefore, the information we need in order to make an accurate calculation is the number of grass tiles in each zone around the tile we want to calculate for. So it's the numbers in these boxes that we need to edit. So for our first example, so here it's 3, 2, 3, 9. So at this tile, the odds of spawning 5 patches is about 1 in 2900, and the odds of spawning 0 patches is about 27%. So there is a very high chance of our chain breaking at this tile. Entering a patch that spawned here or resetting the radar here is very risky. And our experimental results showed that, as we saw a lot of broken chains. So for our second example, so here it's 5, 9, 13, 16. So here the odds of spawning 5 patches is about 5.5%, and the odds of spawning 0 patches is about 1.6%. So the odds of spawning 5 patches are a bit better than the odds of spawning 0, which makes sense since a bit over half the spawnable area falls on grass. And this is reflected in our experimental results, as we saw 5 patches spawn once but didn't see any broken chains in 30 resets. It should take about 63 resets on average for a broken chain at this tile. And for our last example, so at this tile, it's 7, 14, 22, 21, giving us an odds of spawning 5 patches at about 41%, and the odds of spawning 0 patches is about 1 in 20,000. So while it is theoretically possible for our chain to break at this tile, the odds of that happening are completely negligible. I'd say it's perfectly okay to even manually reset your radar here if you want to. I'd again like to make it very clear that it's only possible for 0 patches to shake if the radar is activated on an edge patch. So if we reset here, for example, which isn't an edge, and we try calculating that. So 7, 8, 9, and this is an 8, and as soon as I put an 8 in this box, it's going to put a 0 in the formula, and the odds of spawning 0 patches will be 0%. So it doesn't matter what these numbers are, as long as that number is an 8, the odds of spawning 0 patches will always be 0%. Okay, so that's how you can calculate the odds of edge patch chain breaks. However, I don't actually recommend anyone use this calculator for anything. It's not the easiest thing to use since you need to count the number of grass tiles in each zone around the tile you want to calculate for, which is annoying to do unless you draw out a diagram. But there is little reason for anyone to use this calculator, as I have already ran all of the relevant calculations for you. I'm going to now retire the image of the Poké radar in the top right of the screen, as I have something more important to put in that spot. Enter edge patch analysis. So what I have done is ran this calculation for all the edge patches in every field of grass and Kalos that I recommend chaining in, taking the odds of spawning 0 patches for each edge, and presented this information in documents that are available for everyone to use. So for each route in the document, there will be an edge patch analysis link. If you click this link, it will take you to the edge patch document for the corresponding route. And the edge patch documents are also linked down here as well, if that makes it any easier to find the one that you're looking for. So if you click one of these links, it will look like this. So these are just Google slideshow documents, so basically like PowerPoint presentations. I think the best way to navigate these is just to hold down the up or down arrow keys, which advances the slide super fast, so you can quickly find the edge that you want to check. As usual, the blue square is the tile the radar is being activated, so that is the edge you are checking. And with the diagrams, you can visually see how much grass is in the spawnable area around the tile you are checking, and therefore how likely it might be for zero patches to shake. The numbers in white are the odds of zero patches shaking, or the odds of an edge patch chain break. So at this tile, the odds are approximately 15% or 1 in 7. And the coloured numbers at the top are the numbers of grass tiles in each zone, which is the information you need in order to make the calculation. To be honest, the main reason I put these 4 numbers there was just because it was convenient for me as I was making these documents. But the 4 numbers here should in theory match the number of coloured squares in the diagram. If they don't match, it probably means I made a mistake with the calculation. So if anyone thinks they have spotted any mistakes in these documents, please let me know. For these videos, I will be using slightly modified versions of the edge patch documents, which will be in the top right corner of the screen. So pay attention to the top right diagram. So for rectangular shaped fields of grass, edge patch risk is pretty simple. The very corner is always the riskiest, and the edges get safer and safer the further you move away from the corner. These numbers 15%, 6%, 3.2% and 2% are pretty typical of rectangular shaped sections, unless it's a very skinny rectangle. And this risk is going to increase again as we move closer and closer to this corner. And then a similar pattern for the edges along this straight. This edge here was our second example, and it's as far away from the corner as you can get. 1.6% isn't too risky, as it has a pretty decent number of grass tiles in the spawnable area around it. And then the edges along this straight are a bit riskier due to the hole reducing the amount of grass tiles available for patches to spawn. Our first example here is the riskiest edge patch in this entire field. This hole making it much riskier than your typical corner patch. And these percentages are going to plummet as we move to these patches that are towards the center of the field, as there is just so much grass around them. Having literally every single purple flower tile in this field in the spawnable area, our third example is the safest edge patch at Route 21. And obviously the edge patch risk is going to start increasing again as we move further and further away from the middle of the field. Just taking a look at a few other edge patch examples. So you might think that a patch like this one, that has 7 grass tiles directly adjacent to you, looks, I guess, less edgy and is therefore less risky. And that is absolutely the case. It's not the only important factor. You do need to take the entire spawnable area into consideration, but the number of one-zone grass tiles is a variable in the formula, so it does play a big part. And this edge right next to it, for example, has the exact same number of grass tiles in the spawnable area, 18 in both cases, but because it in comparison has a more even distribution of 1 and 2 zone grass tiles, it is quite a bit riskier than this one. So having 7 one-zone grass tiles like this essentially puts a 1/8 multiplier in the formula, and because patch 5 has a chance to spawn in the 1 zone as well, that fact makes it even safer. But 18 grass tiles in the spawnable area still isn't a lot, and 4.2% certainly isn't the safest option. And a patch such as this one, which has a lot more grass in the spawnable area, is still going to be a bit safer. Route 10 is one place where I would absolutely recommend taking a lot of edges when building your chain. If you look through the Route 10 edge patch document, you will see that the majority of these edges adjacent to the pillars are incredibly unlikely to break your chain, so there is very little risk involved. You will notice that a few of these pillar edges actually say 0%. I've been saying that in order for it to be possible to spawn 0 patches at a particular tile, there must be at least one grassless tile in each zone. And that is not the case with some of these patches adjacent to the pillars. This patch, for example, has 16 out of 16 of the 2 zone tiles falling on grass. So in this case, there is not at least one grassless tile in each zone. The 2 zone has no grassless tiles. So patch 2 will always shake. So in the same way that putting an 8 in this box will put a 0 in the formula, putting a 16 in this box will also put a 0 in the formula. So understand that not all edge patches have a chance of breaking your chain. One last example that I want to discuss is this patch. So it has 42 grass tiles in the spawnable area, but the odds of spawning 0 patches is only 0.31%, so it's crazy safe. The main reason it's so safe is because there are 15 out of 16 grass tiles in the 2 zone, so it's one grass tile away from being a 0% edge. This puts a 1/16 multiplier in the formula, and again because patch 5 has a chance to spawn in the 2 zone as well, it makes it even safer. Even though this patch next to it here has an extra 1 zone grass tile, it is way riskier since it has a lot less 2 zone grass tiles and a lot less grass in the spawnable area in total. So while the number of 1 zone grass tiles is an important factor, it's not everything. You need to take the entire spawnable area into consideration. Some final points to conclude this video. My overall strategies for taking edge patches when building radar chains typically varies from route to route. At a route like this, for example, this is Route 11, where the majority of the field of grass is edge. You're pretty much forced to take a lot of edges to build your chain, and you want to make sure to take the safer edges as your chain length gets higher. Obviously, you are allowed to play as risky as you wish. If you see a good patch shake on a 3.7% edge, for example, just ask yourself, are you willing to take that risk based on your current chain length? And you may be often in a situation where you have the option of taking a 3 zone fast shaker or a 4 zone fast shaker that is on an edge, and may wonder which is your safer option. So this is a hypothetical scenario here, where both patch 3 and 4 had spawned as a fast shaker. The 4 zone patch is on an edge and the 3 isn't. My approximate estimate is that if the edge is below 5%, then taking the edge is your safer option. If the edge is around 5%, then the risk is probably comparable. If the edge is quite a bit riskier than 5%, then taking the 3 is probably the safer option. So in this scenario, since the 4 zone patch spawned on a 2.2% edge, it is definitely your safest option here, so this is the patch that I would take. So I don't really have any recommended way to use the edge patch documents. When I made these, I didn't really know how people were going to use them. You are free to use this information as you wish. I know some people like to check the number right before stepping into every edge, and you can certainly do that if you want. Do keep in mind these numbers are just probabilities, and in some ways probabilities are arguably kind of meaningless. If the probability is 4%, for example, what that is really saying is that if you do thousands of repetitions, then you will see 0 patches shake 1 in every 25 times on average. But since you won't be doing many repetitions, you will never be quite sure what is going to happen, and sometimes the RNG will just hate you even if the odds are vastly in your favor. So do keep that in mind. My main objective with these edge patch documents was to help people better understand the risk associated with edge patches. Hopefully this video was informative. Thanks for watching.